The blood had stopped pooling hours ago, but Karga refused to move from where she knelt in the dirt beside Shara's body. The battlefield had gone silent, except for the crows that circled overhead, their harsh calls echoing across the trampled grass where two clans had met in violence that morning. Karga's green hands were still wrapped around her friend's cold fingers, her small tusks clenched so tight her jaw ached. Shara's eyes stared sightlessly at the sky, her chest unmoving beneath the leather armor that had failed to stop the blade that killed her. They had grown up together in the Ironhide clan, shared food when times were lean, practiced with wooden swords until their arms burned, and sworn they would always watch each other's backs. That promise felt like ash in Karga's mouth now. The sun had climbed high and begun its descent toward the western hills. Karga's legs had gone numb beneath her, her throat raw from the screams she had released when Shara fell. Both clans had retreated hours ago, dragging their wounded and dead with them, but Karga had been left behind. She had refused to leave Shara's side even when her clan chief had ordered her to fall back. She had roared at her own brothers when they tried to pull her away, her grief transforming into rage that sent them stumbling backward. They had left her then, and she knew what that meant. By refusing the chief's direct command, by choosing loyalty to a fallen warrior over loyalty to the clan, she had marked herself as an outcast. There would be no returning to the Ironhide camp now. She did not care. Let them cast her out. Let them call her traitor or fool. Shara deserved better than to be left on this field like refuse, and if Karga could give her nothing else, she could give her this vigil. The shadows grew longer. Karga's voice was barely a whisper now as she spoke to her friend, telling her stories of when they were young, of the time they had stolen honey from the beehives and been chased through the forest by angry swarms, of the night they had climbed to the highest peak to watch the stars wheel overhead. Her words felt inadequate, too small to contain everything Shara had been, but she spoke them anyway because silence felt like abandonment. She did not hear the approach of footsteps until they were close, the soft crunch of boots on grass. Karga's head snapped up, her hand flying to the blade at her hip. Her vision swam from dehydration and exhaustion, but she could make out a figure approaching across the battlefield. A human. Her muscles tensed, ready to fight even though she could barely stand. If this human thought to desecrate Shara's body or claim some trophy, they would learn that Karga still had strength enough to defend her friend. The figure stopped a respectful distance away, and Karga could see him more clearly now. He was a man, perhaps 30 years of age, with sun-weathered skin and brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore simple clothing, a linen shirt and worn trousers, not armor. A farmer, she realized, not a soldier. He carried no weapon that she could see, only a walking stick and a leather satchel slung over one shoulder. His brown eyes were cautious but not hostile as they took in the scene before him. "I mean no harm," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "My name is James Morgan. I have a farm on the other side of that hill." Karga said nothing, her hand still on her blade. She watched him with the wariness of a wounded animal, ready to strike if he moved wrong. James shifted his weight but did not come closer. "I saw the battle from my fields this morning. I stayed inside until the fighting moved on. I came to see if anyone needed help." His gaze moved to Shara's body, and something sad flickered across his face. "I am sorry for your loss." "Go away," Karga rasped, her voice cracking. "Leave us." "I have water," James said, slowly reaching into his satchel. Karga tensed, but he withdrew only a leather water skin. He held it up so she could see it clearly, then set it on the ground and stepped back. "And food. You have been here all day. I said go away." Karga's words had no force behind them. She was too tired, too hollowed out by grief. James regarded her for a long moment, and she saw something in his expression that she had not expected. Not fear or disgust, though she knew humans viewed orcs as monsters. Not pity either, which she would have hated. It was something closer to understanding, the recognition of one person who had lost someone seeing another in the same circumstance. "Your friend deserves a proper burial," he said gently, "not to be left for scavengers." Karga's grip on her blade tightened, but tears were burning in her eyes now. "I cannot carry her alone, and I have nowhere to take her. My clan has cast me out." James nodded slowly, as though this confirmed something he had suspected. "I have a cart at the bottom of the hill. I can help you bring her to my farm. There is good ground there beneath an oak tree. If you want, we can lay her to rest there." "Why?" Karga's voice broke on the word. "Why would you help me? I am an orc. Your people and mine have been enemies for generations." "Because no one should be left alone with their grief," James said simply. "And because I know what it is to lose someone you love and be unable to save them." Something in his tone, the rawness of old pain that still had not healed, made Karga believe him. She looked down at Shara's face, peaceful now in death, and felt the weight of her choice settling on her shoulders. She could stay here until she died of exposure or thirst, guarding a body that no longer housed the spirit of her friend. Or she could accept help from this strange human who offered kindness when he had no reason to. "If you try anything," she said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength, "if you dishonor her in any way, I will kill you." "I understand," James said. He picked up the water skin and walked forward slowly, holding it out to her. "Drink first, then we will see to your friend." Karga took the water skin with trembling hands and drank deeply. The water was cool and sweet, and she had not realized how desperately thirsty she was until the first swallow. She drank half the skin before forcing herself to stop, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. James nodded. "Can you stand?" Karga tried to rise and nearly fell. Her legs had been folded beneath her for too many hours and the circulation had been cut off. James caught her elbow, steadying her, and she flinched at the contact. But his grip was gentle and purely supportive, not restraining. He helped her find her balance, then stepped back again. "The cart is not far," he said, "but I will need your help to carry her." Together, moving slowly and with great care, they lifted Shara's body. Karga cradled her friend's shoulders while James took her legs, and they walked across the battlefield toward the hill. It was harder than Karga expected. Her body was weak from the day's ordeal, and each step felt like moving through deep water. But James matched his pace to hers, patient and steady, never rushing or complaining. The cart waited at the base of the hill, pulled by a sturdy brown horse that whickered softly at their approach. James had lined the cart bed with clean straw and a blanket, and Karga felt something crack in her chest at this small kindness, this evidence that he had prepared a dignified resting place before even finding her. They laid Shara gently in the cart, and Karga arranged her friend's hands across her chest, straightening her armor and smoothing her dark hair. "She was beautiful," James said softly. "Your friend, she must have been very brave." "The bravest," Karga said, her voice thick. "She saved my life more than once. This morning, she was fighting beside me, and then she was laughing about something, and then—" She could not finish, could not speak the moment when the blade had found the gap in Shara's armor, when the light had left her eyes. James said nothing, but his silence felt companionable rather than awkward. He simply waited while Karga said her temporary goodbye to Shara, then gestured to the horse. "It is only a mile to the farm. Can you walk, or would you prefer to ride in the cart?" Karga looked at Shara's body and shook her head. "I will walk." They set off as the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that seemed too beautiful for such a terrible day. James led the horse, and Karga walked beside the cart, one hand resting on the wooden side, maintaining contact with her friend. They did not speak during the journey. The path wound through rolling hills dotted with wildflowers, and Karga could smell crops growing somewhere nearby, wheat or barley perhaps. It was peaceful country, far from the borderlands where clans and human settlements clashed regularly. The farm came into view as the last light faded from the sky. It was a modest place, a single-story stone house with a thatched roof, a barn and several outbuildings. Fields stretched out in neat rows, and Karga could see a vegetable garden near the house. A dog barked from somewhere, then appeared, a black and white creature that bounded toward them with tail wagging. It stopped short when it saw Karga, tilting its head curiously but showing no aggression. "That is Moss," James said. "He is friendly, even to strangers." Moss approached Karga cautiously, sniffed her hand, then seemed to decide she was acceptable. He trotted alongside them as James led the cart to a spot beneath a massive oak tree that stood at the edge of the farmyard. The tree was ancient, its trunk thick and gnarled, its branches spreading wide to create a canopy of leaves that rustled in the evening breeze. "This is the place I spoke of," James said. "My wife is buried here. Her name was Shara. She died 3 years ago in childbirth. The baby died too, a son." His voice was steady, but Karga heard the grief that time had softened but not erased. "I thought your friend might not mind the company." Karga looked at the simple wooden marker near the base of the tree, weathered but well-maintained, and understood now why this stranger had offered help. He knew what it was to lose everything. He knew what it was to be alone with sorrow. "It is a good place," she said quietly. "Shara would have liked it. She always loved trees." James retrieved 2 shovels from the barn, and they began to dig as the stars emerged overhead. The work was hard, the earth packed and resistant, but it was also good in a way. It gave Karga something to do with her grief, a physical outlet for the rage and sorrow churning inside her. They dug in silence, taking turns when one grew tired, until they had created a grave deep enough and long enough. By the time they finished, it was full dark. James brought lanterns from the house and set them around the grave, then helped Karga lift Shara from the cart. They lowered her carefully into the earth, and Karga climbed down to arrange her properly, making sure she looked peaceful, making sure she would rest comfortably. She removed her own clan medallion, the one that marked her as Ironhide, and placed it on Shara's chest. "You were the truest sister I ever had," she whispered. "I am sorry I could not save you. I am sorry I have to leave you here, but I promise I will remember you every day. I promise you will not be forgotten." She climbed out, and together she and James filled in the grave. Each shovelful of dirt felt like goodbye, and Karga's tears fell freely now, dripping onto the earth. When it was done, they patted the dirt smooth, and James brought stones to mark the grave, arranging them in a careful border. "I can make a marker," he said, "if you tell me her name." "Shara of the Ironhide clan," Karga said. "She was 19 years old. She died with honor in battle, protecting those she loved." James nodded. "I will carve it tomorrow." They stood before the grave for a while, and Karga spoke a prayer in the orc language, words for the dead that asked the spirits to guide Shara to the place where warriors feast and fight in joy. James bowed his head respectfully, though he could not understand the words. When Karga finished, she felt hollowed out, emptied of everything but exhaustion. She swayed on her feet, and James caught her arm again. "You need food and rest," he said. "Come inside." Karga wanted to refuse. She did not belong in a human home. She did not belong anywhere now. But her body was failing, and she had no strength left to walk away into the night. So she nodded mutely and let him guide her toward the house. The interior was simple but clean, with a large fireplace, a wooden table and chairs, a bed in the corner, and shelves lined with dishes and supplies. James stirred the embers in the fireplace and added wood, coaxing the fire back to life, then set a pot of stew to warm. Karga stood awkwardly near the door, uncertain where to be or what to do. She felt too large for this space, too rough for its domesticity. "Sit," James said, gesturing to the table. "Please." Karga sat, and Moss came to rest his head on her knee, looking up at her with soft brown eyes. She found herself stroking the dog's head automatically, taking comfort from the warm, living presence. James brought her stew and bread, and Karga ate mechanically, tasting nothing but forcing herself to swallow. She knew she needed the strength. After she finished, James set a cup of water beside her and took the seat across the table. "You are welcome to stay here tonight," he said. "There is a room in the barn that I use for storage. I can clear it and make it comfortable. In the morning you can decide what you want to do." "I have nowhere to go," Karga said flatly. "My clan has disowned me. I cannot return." "Then you can stay longer," James said, "if you want." "I could use help with the farm. It is too much for one man, really. I manage, but barely." Karga stared at him. "You would let an orc stay on your land, work your farm. Your neighbors will think you have gone mad." "I do not have many neighbors," James said. "The nearest farm is 3 miles away. And I do not particularly care what anyone thinks." He met her eyes steadily. "You need a place to be, and I need help. It seems like a practical arrangement." "You do not know me," Karga said. "I could rob you, kill you in your sleep." "You could," James agreed, "but you would not. I saw how you stayed with your friend all day, refusing to leave her. That told me what kind of person you are, and I am a good judge of character. I have to be, living alone out here." Karga shook her head slowly. "Why are you doing this?" "Truly," James was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "After Sarah died, I thought about leaving, selling the farm, going back to the city where I grew up. But I stayed because she loved this place, and leaving would have felt like abandoning her. For 2 years I worked this land alone, and I was so lonely I thought I might go mad. Then last year, a traveling merchant stopped here for water. He was kind, and we talked, and he reminded me that the world still had good people in it. He told me that grief makes us smaller if we let it, but it can also make us more compassionate if we choose that instead." He looked at Karga directly. "You are grieving. I am still grieving, even after 3 years. Maybe we can help each other bear it." Karga felt something loosen in her chest, some knot of tension she had been carrying since Shara fell. This human, this stranger, was offering her something she had never expected: acceptance without judgment, refuge without conditions. "I do not know how to farm," she said, her voice small. "I can teach you," James said. "It is not complicated. Mostly it is just hard work and patience." "I am good at hard work," Karga said. "Then we have an agreement." James extended his hand across the table, palm up, in the human gesture of friendship and bargaining. Karga looked at his hand for a long moment, then reached out and clasped it with her own. His skin was warm and calloused from labor, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Agreement," she said. That night she slept in the barn room that James hastily cleared and furnished with blankets and a pallet. It was not comfortable by any measure, but it was dry and safe, and after the horrors of the day, that was enough. She lay awake for hours, staring at the dark ceiling, thinking about Shara, about her clan, about the strange turn her life had taken. She had expected to die today, either in battle or from grief. Instead, she was alive, sheltered by a human who had no reason to show her kindness. She did not know what the future held. But for the first time since the sun had risen on that terrible battle, She felt a faint ember of something that might, eventually, become hope. The days that followed fell into a pattern that was both strange and soothing. Karga woke each morning before dawn, washed at the pump in the yard, and met James in the kitchen where he would have porridge or bread ready for breakfast. They ate together mostly in silence, neither of them being people who needed to fill every moment with words. Then they would go out to work the farm. James was patient as he taught her the rhythms of agricultural life. She learned to milk the 2 cows, though her large hands felt clumsy on the teats at first, and the cows eyed her suspiciously. She learned to collect eggs from the chickens, who scattered in panic the first few times she entered their coop, but gradually accepted her presence. She learned to hoe weeds from the vegetable garden, to water the plants in the evening when the sun was not so fierce, to recognize which insects were helpful and which needed to be removed. The physical labor was demanding but satisfying. Karga had always been strong, trained for warfare since childhood, and she found that her strength translated well to farming. She could lift sacks of grain that James struggled with. She could repair the fence around the pasture by setting posts that would have required 2 men. She could work through the heat of midday when James needed to rest in the shade. James, for his part, treated her with consistent respect and kindness. He never ordered her around but rather suggested tasks and asked if she was willing. He never touched her without permission, even casually. He paid her for her work with coins he kept in a box in the house, insisting that she was an employee, not a servant, and deserved fair wages. Karga tried to refuse at first, saying room and board were payment enough, but James was adamant. "You work harder than any hired hand I have ever had," he said. "You deserve to be paid. Besides, you may want to leave someday, and you will need money when you do." The thought of leaving made something twist uncomfortably in Karga's chest, but she took the coins and saved them in her own small pouch. They visited Shara's grave together every evening. James had carved a beautiful marker from oak, with Shara's name and dates etched carefully into the wood. Karga would sit beneath the tree and talk to her friend, telling her about the day, about the things she was learning, about the strange kindness of this human farmer. James would tend to his wife's grave nearby, pulling weeds and leaving wildflowers, and sometimes he would talk to Shara too, his voice soft and private. One evening, about 2 weeks after Karga had arrived, she asked him about his wife. What was she like? James smiled, though sadness flickered in his eyes. She was clever and stubborn. She laughed easily. She loved growing things and could make anything thrive. She used to say that plants just needed someone to believe in them. He touched the gravestone gently. "We met in the city when we were young. I was a soldier then, part of the border guard. She was a healer's apprentice. I got injured in a skirmish, nothing serious, but I had to stay in the healing house for a week. She took care of me and we talked every day. By the time I was well enough to leave, I knew I wanted to marry her." "What made you stop being a soldier?" Karga asked. "I saw too much death," James said quietly. "Too many young people dying over land disputes and old grudges. I killed people, Karga. I was good at it. But it started to hollow me out inside. Shara saw it happening and she said we should leave, start over somewhere peaceful. So we bought this farm and tried to build a different kind of life." He looked at Karga. "We had 5 good years here before she died. I do not regret leaving the military. But I regret every day that I could not save her when it mattered." "Some things cannot be saved," Karga said. "No matter how strong we are or how much we love someone. I learned that when Shara died." "Yes," James said, "but knowing that does not make it easier." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, united in their shared understanding of loss. As the weeks passed into months, Karga began to change in ways she had not expected. The constant tension she had carried in her body, the readiness for violence that warrior training had ingrained, gradually eased. She still practiced with her blade each morning, keeping her skills sharp, but she found herself thinking less about combat and more about whether the tomatoes needed staking or if the barn roof would hold through the coming winter. She grew to love the rhythm of the seasons, the way each day brought different tasks and challenges. She learned to bake bread, though her first attempts were dense as stones, and James had laughed until tears ran down his face. She learned to preserve vegetables for winter, to smoke meat, to churn butter. These were skills no orc warrior would have valued, but Karga found deep satisfaction in them. There was a kind of power in creation, she realized, that was different from but equal to the power of destruction she had been taught. She also grew to appreciate James as a person. He was steady and reliable, never raising his voice or acting with casual cruelty. He had a dry sense of humor that emerged once he grew comfortable with her, making observations about the chickens' personalities or the stubbornness of the old plow horse that made Karga laugh despite herself. He was generous, sharing everything he had without expectation of extra gratitude. And he was lonely, she realized, in the same bone-deep way that she was lonely. They were two people who had lost their other halves, trying to figure out how to live in a world that felt diminished. They began to talk more as summer turned to autumn. During meals, during breaks from work, during the quiet evenings when they sat outside and watched the stars emerge. James told her about his childhood in the city, about his parents who had died when he was young, about his time as a soldier and the friends he had lost. Karga told him about growing up in the Ironhide clan, about the rigid hierarchy and the constant pressure to prove her strength, about her friendship with Shara and the adventures they had shared. "You miss it?" James asked one evening. "The clan life," Karga considered the question carefully. "I miss Shara. I miss having a place where I belonged, even if that place was hard, but I do not miss the violence. I do not miss waking every day wondering if today I would have to kill someone or be killed. There was honor in it, or so we were taught. But looking back now, I think there was mostly waste, so many dying so young over territory or pride." "That is what I felt about the border wars," James said. "All that death, and for what? The borders never really changed, the grudges never ended. Just generation after generation feeding the same anger." "You think it will ever change?" Karga asked. "I do not know," James admitted, "but I think it has to start with people like us, people willing to see past what we have been taught to fear." Autumn brought the harvest, and Karga threw herself into the work with enthusiasm. She learned to cut wheat, to thresh grain, to pick apples from the small orchard. James hired 2 men from the nearest town to help with the heaviest work, and Karga was nervous about meeting other humans. But James introduced her simply as his farmhand, and though the men were clearly startled by her presence, they followed James's lead in treating her with basic courtesy. They worked together for a week, bringing in the harvest, and by the end the men were sharing their lunch with her and teaching her drinking songs that made her ears burn. When they left, one of them, a grizzled older man named Peter, pulled James aside. Karga was too far away to hear their conversation, but she saw Peter gesture toward her and James shake his head firmly. Later, she asked James what had been said. "He wanted to know if I was safe with you here," James said. "He offered to report you to the local magistrate as a potential threat." Karga's blood went cold. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were the best worker I had ever hired and I trusted you with my life. I told him if he spread rumors about you, he would answer to me and I would never hire him again." James met her eyes. I also told him that you had more honor in your little finger than most humans have in their whole bodies, and he would be lucky to have a friend like you." Karga felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You did not have to defend me like that. It could cause problems for you." "You are part of this farm now," James said simply. "That makes you part of my life. I defend what is mine." The way he said it, the casual possessiveness combined with genuine protectiveness, made something warm bloom in Karga's chest. She pushed the feeling away, uncomfortable with examining it too closely. Winter came hard that year, with early snows and bitter cold. Karga and James worked together to prepare, sealing drafts in the barn and house, laying in supplies of firewood and food, making sure the animals would be warm enough. Karga moved from the barn to a small room in the house at James's insistence. He claimed it was impractical for her to sleep in an unheated space, and she was too practical to argue. The winter nights were long and dark, and they fell into the habit of sitting by the fire together, Karga mending tools or carving wood while James read aloud from the small collection of books he owned. She had never learned to read, but she loved listening to stories. James had a good voice for it, expressive and warm, and he would explain things when she asked questions. One night, during a particularly fierce blizzard that trapped them inside, James was reading a collection of poetry. He came to a love poem, something about finding light in darkness, finding home in another person. His voice faltered slightly as he read, and when he finished, silence stretched between them. "That was beautiful," Karga said softly. "Yes," James agreed. He stared into the fire, his expression distant. "Sarah loved poetry. She used to recite it while we worked in the garden." "You still love her," Karga said. It was not a question. "I do," James said. "I think I always will, but it is different now. Less like an open wound, more like a scar. It is part of me, but it does not bleed anymore." He looked at Karga. "Does it feel that way for you?" "With Shara," Karga nodded slowly. "Yes, I think about her every day, but it does not destroy me anymore. I can remember the good times without being overwhelmed by the end." "That is healing, I think," James said. "It does not mean we forget. It just means we learn to carry the weight without collapsing." They sat in silence, watching the fire, two people learning to carry their grief together. As winter deepened, Karga became aware of a shift in her feelings toward James. It started small, barely noticeable. The way her heart lifted when she heard his footsteps in the morning. The way she found herself watching him work, admiring the competent way he moved, the strength in his shoulders. The way his rare smiles made warmth spread through her chest. She tried to ignore it, to push it down and pretend it did not exist. It was impossible, she told herself. He was human, she was orc. His people and hers were enemies. He was still grieving his wife, still visiting her grave every day. And even if none of that mattered, why would he ever see Karga as anything other than a worker, a friend at best? She was not beautiful by human standards. She was too big, too green, too marked by her heritage, but the feelings grew anyway, persistent and undeniable. She found herself wanting to make him happy, to see him smile, to ease the loneliness she knew he carried. She found herself aware of him in ways that had nothing to do with farming or friendship, and it terrified her. James seemed oblivious to her internal struggle, treating her with the same consistent kindness and respect he always had. They worked together, ate together, sat by the fire together, and he gave no sign that he saw her as anything other than what she had been from the beginning, his friend and employee. One night in deep winter, a knock came at the door. It was late, well past dark, and Karga tensed immediately. James frowned, equally puzzled, and went to answer it. A young woman stood on the doorstep, shivering and soaked from snow. She was human, perhaps 20, with blonde hair and frightened blue eyes. "Please," she gasped. "Please help me. My husband, he is hurt." "Our wagon overturned on the road about a mile from here. I saw your light and came for help." James did not hesitate. "Karga, get blankets and the medical supplies. I will harness the horse." They moved with quick efficiency, gathering what they needed and loading the small wagon James used for hauling. The young woman, who said her name was Emma, climbed in beside them, giving Karga nervous glances but saying nothing. They followed her directions through the snow to where a larger wagon lay on its side, a wheel broken. A man lay in the snow beside it, conscious but clearly in pain. "My leg," he groaned. "I think it is broken." James examined him carefully while Karga held the lantern. "Definitely broken. We need to get you somewhere warm and set it properly." He looked at Karga. "Can you lift him? I will need to drive and keep him stable." Karga nodded and bent to gather the injured man in her arms. He cried out as she moved him, but she was as gentle as possible, lifting him as though he weighed nothing and carrying him to their wagon. Emma made a small sound of fear at seeing an orc holding her husband, but James spoke firmly. "She is my friend and she is helping. Your husband needs medical attention, not prejudice." Emma nodded shakily and climbed in beside her husband, holding his hand while Karga steadied him on the ride back to the farm. Once there, they brought him inside and laid him on James's bed. James set the leg with competent hands, having learned field medicine during his soldier days, while Karga held the man still, and Emma tried not to faint. When it was done, the man was pale and sweating but stable. James wrapped him in blankets and gave him something for pain, then made tea for everyone. Emma kept staring at Karga with wide eyes. "I have never seen an orc up close before," she finally said. "I always heard they were monsters, but you helped us. You were gentle with Tom." "Not all orcs are monsters," Karga said quietly. "And not all humans are kind. People are complicated." "I am sorry," Emma said, "for being afraid, and thank you, both of you. I do not know what we would have done if you had not helped." They stayed the night, Tom recovering in James's bed while James and Karga made pallets by the fire. In the morning, James helped them get their wagon upright and repaired the broken wheel. Before they left, Tom pressed coins into James's hand, payment for the medical care and assistance. "I will tell people what you did," Tom said. "Both of you. There are not many who would come out in a blizzard to help strangers." After they left, James divided the coins and tried to give Karga her half. She refused at first, saying she had only done what was right, but James insisted. "You earned it," he said. "You were incredible last night, Karga. The way you lifted him so carefully, the way you kept him calm while I set the bone. You have a gift for helping people." The praise made Karga's face heat, and she ducked her head to hide the green flush that darkened her cheeks. "You did the real work. I just carried him." "We worked together," James said, "like we always do." He smiled at her and Karga's heart stumbled in her chest. That night, lying in her small room, she finally admitted to herself what she had been denying for weeks. She had fallen in love with James Morgan. It was hopeless and foolish and completely impossible, but it was true. She loved his kindness, his strength, his dry humor, his wounded heart that was slowly healing. She loved the life they had built together on this farm, the quiet companionship and shared purpose. She loved him in a way that was utterly different from how she had loved Shara. Where Shara had been her sister, her mirror, James had become something deeper. He had become home. But she would never tell him. She could not risk the fragile peace they had built by burdening him with feelings he could not return. So she would love him silently, gratefully, taking what happiness she could from simply being near him. Spring came slowly, the snow melting to reveal green shoots pushing through the earth. The farm came alive again with new calves, new chicks, new growth in the fields. Karga had been living with James for nearly a year now, and she could hardly recognize the grief-shattered warrior who had knelt beside her friend's body on that terrible day. She was still an orc, still strong and capable in battle. But she was also a farmer now, a healer of small creatures, a baker of bread, a mender of fences. She was someone who belonged somewhere. One morning in early spring, she went out to check on the pregnant cow and found that the calf had been born during the night. The mother was lowing anxiously, and Karga saw why. The calf was not nursing, lying still in the straw. She approached carefully and found that it was breathing but weak, too weak to stand or feed. She ran to get James, who came immediately. Together they worked to warm the calf, to coax it to take milk from a bottle, to stimulate it to move. It was a long, exhausting morning, but finally the calf struggled to its feet and began to nurse from its mother properly. James sagged with relief, and Karga found herself grinning. "We saved it," she said. "We did," James agreed. He was smiling too, that rare bright smile that transformed his whole face. On impulse, Karga reached out and squeezed his hand just for a moment, sharing the joy of this small victory. James squeezed back, his grip warm and firm, and their eyes met. Something changed in that moment. The air between them felt suddenly charged, heavy with things unsaid. James did not let go of her hand immediately, and Karga saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Awareness. Recognition. A question. Then Moss barked from outside, chasing something in the yard, and the moment broke. James released her hand and stepped back, his cheeks flushed. "I should, check on the chickens, make sure nothing got into the coop." He left quickly, and Karga stood alone in the barn, her heart racing. Had she imagined it? That look, that moment? Or had James felt it too? Whatever was growing between them, she did not know. But something had shifted, and she could not pretend otherwise. In the days that followed, the awareness grew. Karga caught James watching her sometimes, his expression thoughtful and intense. Their casual touches, passing tools or working together, seemed to linger longer than necessary. The comfortable silence between them felt weighted now, full of things neither dared to voice. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Karga did not know what to do. She had been trained to fight enemies, not navigate the complex terrain of human courtship. And even if James did feel something for her, acting on it would be dangerous for both of them. Humans and orcs did not fall in love. It was forbidden, taboo, the kind of thing that could get them both killed if the wrong people found out. But love, Karga was learning, did not care about logic or danger. It simply was, growing like the crops in their fields, nourished by time and care and shared experience. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset, James spoke suddenly. "Karga, can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said, her heart beginning to race. "Are you happy here?" His voice was quiet, almost tentative. "On the farm, I mean, with this life." "Yes," Karga said honestly. "Happier than I have been in a long time, happier than I thought I could be after Shara died." James nodded, still not looking at her. "I am glad, because I do not know what I would do without you now. This past year, having you here, it has been. You have made everything better. The farm, yes, but also just living. You remind me that there is still good in the world. Still reasons to be happy." Karga's breath caught. "James, I am not saying this right," he continued, finally turning to face her. "I am out of practice with talking about feelings, but I need you to know that you are not just my employee or my friend. You are more than that. You have become essential to me, and I—" He trailed off, uncertainty flickering across his face. Karga waited, barely breathing, hoping and fearing what he might say next. "I think I might be falling in love with you," James said finally, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know it is impossible. I know there are 1,000 reasons why it is a terrible idea, but I cannot lie about it anymore. I cannot pretend I do not care for you as more than a friend." Karga stared at him, her mind reeling. "You love me," her voice came out as barely a whisper. "I do," James said. "And if you do not feel the same, I understand. It will not change anything. You will still have a home here for as long as you want. But I had to tell you, I had to be honest." "James," Karga said, her voice shaking, "I have loved you for months. I just thought you could never see me that way. I am an orc. You are human. I thought it was hopeless." James reached out and took her hand, both of his wrapping around her larger green one. "I do not care that you are an orc. I care that you are brave and kind and strong. I care that you make me laugh. I care that you stayed with your friend when anyone else would have run. I care that you have been healing my broken heart without even trying." Tears were running down Karga's face now, and she did not try to stop them. "I am frightened," she admitted. "This could destroy us both. Your people would call you a traitor. My clan would kill me if they knew. There is no safe place for a love like ours." "Then we make our own safe place," James said. "Here on this farm, we have been doing it for a year already. We build a life that is ours by our own rules." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I am not saying it will be easy, but Karga, I am tired of being alone. I am tired of half living. With you, I feel whole again. And if that is worth fighting for, I am willing to fight." Karga looked into his brown eyes, saw the sincerity and hope there, and made her choice. She had spent her whole life following rules, meeting expectations, doing what was required of her. And where had it led? To watching her best friend die on a battlefield in a war she no longer believed in. To being cast out by her own people. To grief and loneliness. But here with James she had found something different. She had found peace, purpose, home, and yes, love, foolish, dangerous, beautiful love. "I am willing to fight too," she said. "For this, for us." James smiled, that bright transformative smile, and stood. He pulled her gently to her feet and reached up to cup her face in his hands. She was taller than him by several inches, but in that moment she felt small and precious beneath his touch. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. In answer, Karga bent her head and brought her lips to his. The kiss was gentle and sweet, tentative as they learned each other. James's lips were soft against hers, his hands warm on her face. Karga's tusks made the angle slightly awkward, but they adjusted, and then it was perfect. It was everything. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Karga felt like her heart might burst from her chest. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," James said. "My fierce, beautiful, impossible gift." They held each other as the stars emerged overhead. Two broken people who had found wholeness in each other, standing on the farm that had become their sanctuary. The summer that followed was the happiest time of Karga's life. She and James did not hide their relationship from each other, though they were careful around the few visitors who came to the farm. They worked side by side during the day, finding excuses to touch and laugh. They ate meals together, talking about everything and nothing. And at night, Karga moved permanently into James's room, into his bed, and they held each other in the darkness, grateful beyond words for what they had found. Their physical relationship was tender and passionate in turns. James was careful with her, always asking what she liked, always making sure she felt safe and cherished. Karga, who had been taught that her orc nature made her rough and unlovable, discovered that James found her beautiful exactly as she was. He traced the green skin of her arms with reverence, kissed the small tusks at her mouth, told her she was perfect. "You are the strongest person I have ever known," he told her one night as they lay tangled together, "but also the gentlest. The way you hold the baby animals, the way you help things grow, You have magic in you, Karga. I am just an orc, she said, but she was smiling. You are my orc, James corrected, and that makes you extraordinary. They visited Shara's grave often, and Karga talked to her friend about James, about the unexpected love she had found. She liked to think that Shara would approve, that she would be happy Karga had found light after so much darkness. James spoke to Sarah too, telling his late wife about Karga, asking for her understanding and blessing. It felt important to honor the past even as they built their future. As summer waned toward autumn, Karga began to think seriously about the future. She and James were living in a fragile bubble, protected by the farm's isolation. But could it last? What would happen if her clan discovered where she was? What would happen if James's human neighbors decided she was a threat? The answer came sooner than she expected. In late summer, 3 orcs appeared on the farm. Karga was working in the garden when she heard Moss barking frantically and looked up to see them approaching. Her blood went cold. She recognized one of them, Grak, a warrior from her old clan. The Ironhide clan had found her. She stood slowly, dropping the hoe and moving to intercept them before they could reach the house where James was working on repairs. Grak, she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. Why are you here? Grak looked at her with hard eyes. He was a large orc, even by their people's standards, with scars marking his face and arms. We have been looking for you, Karga. The clan wants to know why you betrayed us. Why you chose a dead human over your living brothers and sisters. I chose loyalty to my friend over blind obedience to a chief who would have left her to rot, Karga said, and I would make the same choice again. You live with a human now, one of the other orcs said, sneering. We have been watching. You work his land like a slave. Have you no pride? I work his land as a partner, Karga said. He treats me with more respect than the clan ever did. Grak's eyes narrowed. It is worse than we thought. You have forgotten what you are. You have become weak, tamed by human softness. I have become myself, Karga said. Finally. And I will not apologize for it. Then you are a traitor, Grak said flatly, and traitors must be punished. He drew his blade and the other 2 orcs did the same. Karga's mind raced. She was outnumbered and had no weapon, but she knew this ground, knew every rock and tree. And she would die before she let them touch James. If you want to kill me, you will have to catch me first, she said, and then she ran. She led them away from the house, into the fields and toward the forest beyond. She heard them pursuing, their heavy footsteps and angry shouts. She was fast, but they were warriors, trained for the hunt. They were gaining on her. Then she heard a different sound, a shout in a human voice, James's voice. Karga, she looked back and her heart nearly stopped. James was running from the house, carrying his old military sword. He was coming to help her, running straight toward 3 armed orc warriors without hesitation. No, she screamed. James, stay back. But he did not listen. He reached Karga and put himself between her and the pursuing orcs, raising his sword in a defensive stance. You will not touch her, he said, his voice hard with a soldier's authority. Grak stopped, assessing this new threat. A human who loves an orc, disgusting. Step aside or you die with her. Then I die with her, James said, but I will take at least one of you with me. Karga grabbed his arm. James, please. You cannot fight them all. I will not lose you. And I will not lose you, James said fiercely. We stand together or not at all. The 3 orcs spread out, preparing to attack from multiple angles. Karga's heart was pounding. They were going to die here together, and she felt a strange peace beneath the fear. At least they would die fighting for each other. But before anyone could move, a new voice rang out across the field. Hold! Everyone froze. An orc woman emerged from the tree line, older than the warriors, with gray streaking her dark hair. She was small for an orc but carried herself with unmistakable authority. Karga gasped. She knew this woman. Matron Shara, one of the clan elders. Matron, Grak said, clearly surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I followed you," Shara said calmly. "I suspected you would do something foolish in the name of honor, and I was correct." She walked forward until she stood between the two groups, her gaze moving from the warriors to James and Karga. "Put away your weapons, all of you. There will be no bloodshed today." "But Matron, she is a traitor," Grak protested. "She lives with a human. She has abandoned her people." "She chose friendship over war," Shara said. "That is not betrayal, that is evolution." She looked at Karga and her expression softened. "I heard about what you did for Shara, how you stayed with her body all day despite the danger, how you defied the chief to honor your friend. That took more courage than any battle." "You are not angry?" Karga asked, bewildered. "I am tired," Shara said. "Tired of war. Tired of watching our young people die for pride and territory. Tired of clinging to old hatreds." She looked at James. "You are the human who gave Shara a proper burial, who sheltered Karga when she had nowhere to go." "I am," James said cautiously. Shara nodded. "I thank you for that. You showed honor when you had no obligation to do so." She turned back to Grak and the other warriors. "Return to the clan. Tell the chief that I have dealt with Karga. Tell him she is no threat, and if he sends warriors after her again, he will answer to me." "But Matron," Grak began. "Go." Shula's voice cracked like a whip, and the warriors flinched. Grak looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better than to defy an elder in this tone. He sheathed his sword, and after a moment the other two did the same. They turned and walked away, casting dark looks over their shoulders but not daring to disobey. When they were gone, Shula sighed deeply. "I apologize for them. The young are always so certain of right and wrong. They do not understand that the world is more complicated." "Thank you," Karga said, her voice shaking. "You saved our lives." "Perhaps," Shula said, "or perhaps I simply prevented unnecessary death." She studied Karga carefully. "You look well, healthy. You have found peace here." "I have," Karga said. "This is James Morgan. He is. We are." "In love," Shula finished. "Yes, I can see that. The way you stand together, the way you look at each other, it is obvious." She smiled slightly. "And scandalous. An orc and a human. Such a thing would have been unthinkable in my youth." "Is it wrong?" Karga asked quietly. Shula considered the question. "Wrong according to whose laws, whose traditions? Humans and orcs have been enemies for generations, yes. But why? Because we are different, because we fear what we do not understand. But you two, you have chosen to understand each other. To build something together despite everything working against you. That is not wrong. That is brave." James lowered his sword, tension slowly leaving his shoulders. "Will the clan come after her again?" "Not while I live," Shula said firmly. "I have influence among the elders, and I will speak on Karga's behalf. As far as the Ironhide clan is concerned, she died with Shara on that battlefield. Let her stay dead. Let her be free." Karga felt tears pricking at her eyes. "Thank you, Matron. I do not deserve your protection." "You deserve to be happy," Shula said. "You deserve to live without fear. That is what I give you today, a new life free of the past." She reached out and clasped Karga's shoulder briefly. "Be well, child, and you, James Morgan, take care of her. She is stronger than she knows, but everyone needs someone to stand beside them." "I will," James promised. "Always." Shula nodded and turned to leave. She paused at the edge of the clearing and looked back. "There are others like you know. Humans and orcs who have found each other, who are trying to build bridges instead of walls. You are not alone. The world is changing slowly, one brave heart at a time. Perhaps one day love like yours will not need to hide. Until then, guard it well." Then she was gone. disappearing into the forest, and James and Karga were left standing in the field, holding each other, shaking with relief and residual fear. "That was too close," James said, his voice rough. "When I saw them chasing you, I thought my heart would stop." "You should not have followed," Karga said, but she held him tighter. "They could have killed you." "I could not let you face them alone," James said. "Never again. We face everything together from now on." Karga pulled back to look at him, this brave, foolish, wonderful human who had somehow become her entire world. "Marry me," she said suddenly. James blinked. "What? Marry me?" Karga repeated. "I know it cannot be official. No priest would perform the ceremony, no magistrate would recognize it. But here on this farm, just us. Let us promise ourselves to each other for the rest of our lives. Let us make this official in our own way." James's face broke into the brightest smile she had ever seen. "Yes, absolutely yes. Tomorrow, today, whenever you want. I will marry you in front of the whole world or in secret, whichever keeps you safe. I will marry you 1,000 times if it means you are mine and I am yours." They kissed there in the field, surrounded by the crops they had planted together. On the land they had worked together, sealing a promise that defied every rule and tradition either of them had ever known. 2 days later, at sunset, they stood together beneath the oak tree where Shara and Sarah rested. Karga wore a simple dress that she had sewn herself, green fabric that complemented her skin. James wore his best clothes, clean and neat, his hair freshly washed. Moss sat nearby, watching with his head tilted as though he understood the significance of the moment. They had no witnesses except the graves of their beloveds and the land around them. But it felt right. This was where their story had truly begun, where grief had eventually transformed into hope and love. James spoke first, his voice steady and clear. "Karga, when I found you here a year ago, I was a man going through the motions of living. I tended my farm, I ate, I slept, but I was not truly alive. You changed that. You reminded me what it means to care about someone, to build something together, to find joy in small moments. You are my partner, my friend, my love. I promise to stand beside you in whatever comes. I promise to honor you, to protect you, to cherish you for all the days I have left in this world. You are my home, and I choose you today and always." Karga's voice was thick with emotion when she replied, "James, you saved my life in more ways than you know. You gave me shelter when I had nothing, friendship when I was alone, and love when I thought I would never feel it again. You taught me that I could be more than a warrior, more than what my clan made me. You taught me that I deserved gentleness and respect. I promise to stand beside you, to share your burdens, to celebrate your joys. I promise to work this land with you, to build a life with you, to love you with everything I am. You are my home, and I choose you today and always." They exchanged rings that James had fashioned from silver, simple bands with no decoration except for their commitment. James slid Karga's ring onto her finger, and she did the same for him, their hands trembling slightly. "Then by our own authority," James said, "and in the sight of those we have loved and lost, I declare us married. Husband and wife, partners forever." "Husband and wife," Karga repeated. "Forever." They kissed as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in golds and reds and purples, and Moss barked happily, running circles around them. It was perfect. It was everything. That night, they made love in their bed as married people, tender and passionate, whispered promises and breathless laughter. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Karga's head on his chest, James traced patterns on her back with his fingertips. "I have been thinking," he said quietly. "About what?" Karga asked, drowsy and content. "About the future. About what Matron Sheila said about others like us. What if we could help them? What if this farm could be a place where humans and orcs who want peace could meet? A neutral ground. Karga lifted her head to look at him. That is dangerous and ambitious. I know, James said, but we have proven it is possible. We have proven that love can exist between our peoples. Maybe we could help others see that too. Maybe we could be part of the change Shila talked about. Karga considered this. It was dangerous, yes. It would draw attention, possibly hostility from both sides. But it was also a worthy goal, a way to make Shara's death and their own suffering mean something larger. We would need help, she said slowly. We could not do it alone. Then we find people who believe what we believe, James said. Slowly, carefully, we build a community of people who want something better than endless war. It could take years, Karga said. We have years, James said. We have the rest of our lives. Karga smiled and kissed him softly. Then let us do it. Let us build something beautiful from all this pain. Let us make a world where love like ours does not have to hide. Together, James said, together, Karga agreed. They started small. James began visiting the town market more regularly, speaking carefully with vendors and locals, testing opinions about orcs and the possibility of peace. He found that people were more open-minded than he expected, especially the younger generation who were tired of the constant border conflicts. A few expressed cautious interest in meeting peaceful orcs, in finding ways to trade and communicate rather than fight. Karga, meanwhile, made quiet contact with a few orcs she had known before her exile. Word spread slowly through the clan networks that there was a place, a farm owned by a human and worked by an orc, where peace was possible. Some dismissed it as weakness or fantasy. But others, particularly those who had lost loved ones to the fighting, began to take notice. The first official meeting happened in early spring, almost 2 years after Karga had arrived at the farm. 3 humans and 2 orcs met at the farm, sitting around James and Karga's kitchen table, suspicious and uncertain but willing to talk. It was awkward at first, long silences punctuated by stilted conversation. But gradually, as they shared food and stories, barriers began to break down. By the end of the evening, they were not friends, but they were no longer strangers. They were people who had taken the first step toward understanding. More meetings followed, always small, always carefully organized. James and Karga facilitated discussions, helping humans and orcs find common ground. They talked about trade, about shared resources, about ways to resolve disputes without violence. They talked about their families, their fears, their hopes. Slowly, painfully, connections began to form. Not everyone approved. There were incidents, threats, angry confrontations. A group of human villagers came to the farm once, demanding that James stop harboring the orc threat. He stood his ground, speaking calmly but firmly about peace and understanding, refusing to be intimidated. They left eventually, grumbling but unwilling to escalate to violence. An orc war party arrived another time, accusing Karga of corrupting their youth with soft human ideas. She faced them down with the same fierce courage she had shown on battlefields, telling them that true strength was building rather than destroying. They left too, though not without dark promises. Through it all, James and Karga stood together, drawing strength from each other and from the small community of peacemakers growing around them. Their farm became known as neutral ground, a place where enemies could meet and talk without fear of ambush or treachery. It was not easy work. Progress was slow and fragile, setbacks frequent. But it was work that mattered, work that gave their lives meaning. 3 years after their marriage, Karga realized she was pregnant. The discovery was shocking and terrifying. She had not known that orcs and humans could have children together. No one had, But there it was, undeniable, a new life growing inside her. James was overjoyed and terrified in equal measure. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "What if something goes wrong?" Karga worried. "What if the child is not healthy? What if I cannot carry it?" "Then we will face that together," James said, holding her close. "But I believe everything will be fine. Our child will be strong, just like their mother." The pregnancy was difficult, more so than either expected. Karga's body struggled with the half-human child, and there were times when she was so sick she could barely leave the bed. James cared for her tenderly, managing the farm and the peace meetings while nursing her through the hard months. He brought her water when she could not keep food down, held her when she cried from pain and fear, read to her during the long nights when sleep would not come. "I am sorry," she said once, weak and miserable. "I am supposed to be strong. I am supposed to be helping you." "You are growing a whole person inside you," James said gently. "That is the strongest thing anyone can do. Rest. Heal. I have everything else handled." As winter came, Karga's health improved somewhat and she was able to move around again. Her belly swelled large, and she found herself constantly surprised by the life moving inside her. This child, this impossible child, was proof that love could create something new and beautiful from division and hate. The birth happened on a cold winter morning, attended by a human midwife that James had convinced to help despite her reservations about birthing a half-orc child. It was long and hard, Karga laboring for hours while James held her hand and murmured encouragement. But finally, as dawn broke, the baby arrived, a daughter. Small but healthy, crying lustily with green-tinged skin that was lighter than Karga's but darker than James's. She had tiny nubs where tusks would eventually grow, pointed ears, and a shock of dark hair. She was beautiful. She was perfect. "Our daughter," James said, tears running down his face as he held the baby carefully. "Our miracle." They named her Shara, a combination of Shara and Sarah, honoring the two women whose deaths had inadvertently brought them together. Shara was a happy baby, thriving under the devoted attention of both parents. Moss appointed himself her guardian, lying beside her cradle and growling softly if anyone he did not know came too close. News of Shara's birth spread quickly, and reactions were mixed. Some humans and orcs saw her as an abomination, proof that the piecework was unnatural and wrong. But others saw her as hope, living proof that humans and orcs were not so different after all. If they could create life together, surely they could build peace together. Shara grew quickly, showing traits from both her parents. She had James's curiosity and gentleness, Karga's strength and determination. She toddled around the farm, learning to help with small tasks, chattering in a mix of human language and orc words that both parents taught her. She knew nothing of prejudice or fear, growing up in a home where love was the only rule that mattered. By the time Shara was 3, the peace community around the farm had grown substantially. Regular meetings were held, trade agreements established, even a few marriages between humans and orcs who had met at the farm. James and Karga's experiment had blossomed into something larger than they had ever imagined. One evening, sitting on the porch while Shara played in the yard with Moss, Karga reflected on how far they had come. "Do you remember the day you found me?" she asked James. "Kneeling beside Shara's body, ready to die." "I remember," James said. "You were the most heartbroken, fierce person I had ever seen. I knew immediately that you were someone special." "I thought my life was over," Karga said. "I thought I had lost everything that mattered, but I had no idea that everything was actually just beginning." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You gave me a future, James. You and this farm and our daughter and this community we have built. You gave me reasons to live that I never expected to find." "We gave each other that," James said. "I was sleepwalking through life before you arrived. You woke me up. You reminded me what it means to truly live, not just exist." Sarah ran up to them, her green-tinged cheeks flushed from playing. "Papa, Mama, look what Moss found." She held up a smooth river stone, clearly delighted by this treasure. "It is beautiful," Karga said, pulling her daughter into her lap. "Just like you." Sarah giggled and snuggled against her mother, content and safe. James put his arm around both of them, and they sat together watching the sun set over their farm, their sanctuary, their home. Years passed, and the farm continued to thrive as both a working homestead and a center for piecework. Sarah grew into a bright, strong child who knew she was loved beyond measure. More half-orc, half-human children were born to other couples who had found each other through the community. A school was established to teach all children, regardless of heritage, reading and farming and the principles of peace. There were still conflicts, still people who opposed what James and Karga had built. But the community was strong enough now to weather those storms. They had proven that a different way was possible, that humans and orcs could not only coexist, but thrive together. On the 10th anniversary of the day James had found Karga on the battlefield, they returned to the spot with Sarah. It was overgrown now, grass and wildflowers covering the ground where blood had once soaked the earth. Sarah ran ahead, picking flowers while James and Karga walked hand in hand. "I never imagined this," Karga said softly. "When I knelt beside Shara waiting to die, I never imagined that 10 years later I would be here, happy, loved with a family and a purpose." "Grief has a way of transforming us," James said. "If we let it, it can break us, but it can also open us to new possibilities, new connections. Your grief led you to me, and mine led me to you." "Do you think Shara and Sarah would approve?" Karga asked. "Of everything we have built, I think they would be proud," James said. "I think they would love Sarah and love what we have done with their memory. We did not let their deaths be meaningless. We created something beautiful from that pain." Karga nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. They had come so far from that terrible day. They had built a life, a family, a community. They had proven that love was stronger than hate, that peace was possible even in the face of generations of conflict. Sarah came running back with her arms full of flowers. "For the graves," she said seriously. She had grown up visiting Shara and Sarah's resting place, understanding that they were important people who had helped bring her parents together. Together, the three of them walked to the oak tree. The graves were well tended, fresh flowers always present. Sarah carefully arranged her bouquet between the two markers, then stepped back and took both her parents' hands. "Thank you," Karga whispered to her lost friend, "for everything. For your friendship, for your sacrifice, for leading me to this life I never knew I could have." James squeezed her hand, and Sarah hummed a little song, and the evening breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree like a blessing. The sun set behind them, painting the sky in colors of gold and rose, and Karga felt complete. She had loved and lost, grieved and healed, fought and found peace. She had stayed with her friend until a farmer found her, and that farmer had become her husband, her partner, her love. Together they had built something impossible and made it real. She had stayed because love demanded it, loyalty required it. And because she stayed, she had found a new life, new love, new purpose. The orc girl who had refused to leave her fallen friend's side had been transformed by a human farmer's kindness into someone new. A wife, a mother, a peacemaker, a bridge between two worlds. As they walked back to the farmhouse, their home, Karga looked at her family and knew that every moment of pain had been worth it for this. For James's hand in hers, for Sarah's laughter, for the community they had built, for the peace they were creating one small act at a time. She had stayed, and in staying she had found everything. And that, she thought, was the greatest gift that love could give. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope, the possibility of healing, the chance to build something beautiful from broken pieces. The stars emerged overhead, constant and eternal, watching over the farm where an orc woman and a human man had proven that love could conquer hate, that peace could grow from war, that staying loyal to what mattered most could lead to miracles neither had dared to dream. And in the morning, they would wake and tend their fields and teach their daughter and welcome visitors seeking peace, doing the work of building a better world one day at a time, together, always together, until the end of their days and beyond.